Hey, welcome to Cross Examined. I'm Malloy Owen. I'm the host. We got Christina Graham with us tonight, Matt Howard. We're about to get into a very fun topic. It's come up a lot over the last few years. In this particular case, the Episcopalian Church recently voted to pass this measure, essentially taking out gendered pronouns in their book of prayer for God. So anytime God pops up, they make sure he does not have a gender. So this brought up the topic of tonight, which is, what is God's gender? Is God a male, a female, both, or neither? Christina, what are your thoughts?
God is God. He's not a person. He doesn't have a physical body. So I just find it weird for people to dwell so much on attributing a gender to God. He presents himself primarily in the Bible as male. We see him call himself the Father, the Son. And so I think he's, presented that as the appropriate way to refer to him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Matt?
I think I really have trouble with this one. Less because I agree with the Episcopalians, because I don't. Because I've read the Bible. But I think as far as the binary between male and female goes, if we had to choose one of those, God's definitely male. Why? Because he did not choose to have Mary have a daughter. Mary had a son. And that's a fairly important distinction there.
Okay. So I guess the question we're getting, because I want to dig into this more, how is it possible for God to be a specific gender? In this case, male obviously refers to himself as he all the time. I am Lord, I am Father, I am the husband, the bridegroom. So how can he be that?
I think God is. I think God is above gender, in the grand scheme of things. But he has to present himself in a way that people will understand. And in Genesis, he made the man first. He placed the man in authority over the woman. And so I think his presentation of himself as male is a reflection of that gender role that he established back in Genesis. Because he is the head, the authority. He's over the church. He's over everything. And I think that's why he chooses to present himself primarily as masculine to us.
Any thoughts, Matt?
No, I'd say that's pretty well sums up my thought on that one fairly succinctly.
Argument I've heard a lot for God being, demasculinizing him, however you want to phrase it, is this idea that what if God identified as male in the Bible because he was in a male-centered culture, and so he was just trying to appeal to people through their culture?
I mean, again, I think I'd go back to Genesis, because God has God established male as having the authority over women. And while it might have been a more patriarchal society than we have today, we still have that the gender role foundation that we find in Genesis. So I'd say, yeah, the culture is different, but the way God presents himself, I don't think it is necessarily tied to that one culture.
Okay.
Right. And I think a large portion of that would also be that there is never a point where God ties himself down to culture. In other words, not saying that he doesn't use culture, that would be incorrect, but he does things his way, regardless of what culture says. So if he wanted the Messiah to be a woman, it would have been a woman. I mean, no big deal there. He's
Right.
kind of God. He does what he wants. It's good to be the king. So I don't think there's really an argument at all for God being a woman. I see the arguments they're making. They're total. I mean, they don't make sense. They're crap.
And if God wanted to appeal more to the cultural patriarchal society, I think we would see a lot less women in prominent positions in the Bible. Like, you've got a lot of women followers of Jesus. The first people to find Jesus' empty tomb were women. We've got people like Deborah. I just feel like if God was so worried about appealing to culture, he wouldn't even raise up women into those positions of power in the first place, or positions of influence.
And if he was trying to appease the culture, which is kind of what some people go with, if he was trying to appease the culture, he wouldn't have sent Jesus. He would have sent, I don't know, Bubba, this big 6'2", super strong, masculine warrior type guy to just beat the crap out of the Roman Empire with one hand tied behind his back and using mostly his feet. And it would have been this quintessential strong-armed warrior, Hashimak the Great or something. It wouldn't have been Jesus. Say Hashimak's kind of a cool name. I have to remember that one. Hope it doesn't translate badly.
Let's say, watch it translate into something really bad.
Watch it translate like the worst word in the Hebrew language.
Now, we're looking at, like what Christina said earlier, was she sees God as being above gender. That our idea of trying to gender God has been unnecessary. He identifies as a male, but trying to gender him has been unnecessary. This is kind of also just something I'm throwing in. Since God does identify as male in Scripture, and they're in the time period of the Israelites, and even when they were part of the Roman Empire and the Babylonian Empire and stuff, we saw gods that were either hermaphroditic, as in they might be both genders, or gods that were just completely other. To you, what is the significance of a God who maintains that? Like, he consistently calls himself male throughout all the scriptures, like all the way to the New Testament, where like that idea wouldn't have been too alien.
Well, I would think that most important is if God's identifying as a male, which he is, then isn't it hate speech to say that he's anything else? No. Just kidding. More importantly, I think it's important that he identifies himself that way through the Bible, because if you look at the Greeks and the Romans and the people of the day and further back, Balashira, all that crap, and even in the Old Testament gods, what you see is those who were not particularly masculine or feminine. You see Ares, even the Greek god of war, running around sleeping with dudes. You see Apollo, one of the greatest and most beneficent gods that there was in Greek culture, running around sleeping with Hyacinth, which was a dude, that kind of thing. And so and you see them doing non-masculine things, or things that were against what our God stands for. They were unfaithful to their spouses and things like that. And so it's important that we understand, not necessarily is God male or female. That's not really the crux of why he would do it that way, but to show that he is this masculine kind of authority figure that we're supposed to listen to.
Right, yeah, I would agree with that. I'd also add, too, that, like, if he were to refer to himself as, like, both in the scriptures and when he was, like, revealing himself to people, that would have caused a whole lot of confusion, and probably caused a lot of people to start thinking that maybe there's more than one. Like, maybe there's a male and a female, and I think it would have caused a lot of unnecessary confusion. I think consistency is important. Like, even today, if you have somebody who's like, I don't know, calling themselves a guy one day and a female the next, I would start to question like their sanity. Like, maybe they've got like dual personalities and need to find some help. It's very important.
Or back then,
to have a relationship with someone, you gotta have consistency.
Yeah. Now, in this particular example, the Episcopalians, Something they quoted they weren't arguing for it, but they were just being asked and they answered why they believe this. Anyways, she said in Genesis 17, God refers to himself as El Shaddai. And in some modern translations, they have interpreted this to mean God with breasts. So, please.
Sorry. I tried to keep a straight face. I tried really hard.
Before we started, and I still can't keep a straight face when you read it out loud. I'm so sorry.
It's so weird. Okay, God isn't. I mean, Jesus came as a person, so like he was fully human. But God isn't a physical being. So like even if he was gonna tell them, hey, I'm a woman, I just don't think that's how he would do it because he's not a physical being. Like I just think there would be other ways that he would reveal that. That's just weird.
I am imagining an awkward conversation with Abraham where he's just like, yeah, Abraham, I got breasts. He's like, what? Why did I have to know that?
Yeah, like, what? Okay. That's just weird. Bizarre.
And I don't want to make that too political. Sorry, we're going to skip that part. And I would agree. I think there would be better ways that the almighty creator of Earth, the universe, and everything in it could be like, yo, by the way, I'm not a dude. I think it would be a little more obvious than that at this point. Again, maybe using the word she in the Bible. But before this came up, I'm going to have to pull it up here so I have the exact right wording. I was actually talking to somebody about this whole thing, and they gave me some insight. As I've said before on our program here, I don't speak Hebrew. I don't speak Greek. I do study them when I'm doing word studies and such, but it's not really what I went to school for, particularly, so the languages are a bit beyond me. However, this guy has a degree in that kind of thing. So, this is what he said. The Hebrew word for breast is shad. The term shaddai, same thing, is more accurately translated as strong-breasted, as in muscle, hence mighty or almighty. The translation that's been accepted since Josephus, at least, probably since Peter and Paul and Mary and all their great music, just kidding, would be El Shaddai, God Almighty. Has nothing to do with whether breast means, like breastbone, or whether breast means like breasts, or, it doesn't.
Yeah.
The word doesn't even translate that way. It's referring to a physical strength, not physical attributes.
Yeah.
Right. And I was reading an article, I believe it was by a rabbi, and he was talking about that translation, and he said, like, it was pretty clear from the article that, like, he didn't really hold to that translation, but, like, if we do allow for this translation of breasts instead of the other word I don't remember that means powerful, it'd be more like comparing it to like a child-parent relationship. The breasts of a mother provide for a child, and another translation for that accepted translation is all sufficient. It's more like, he provides for us, he cares for us like a parent does his child, not necessarily making a statement on gender.
Yeah, I'm imagining, like, if we read Genesis 17 and do replace El Shaddai with that interpretation, how awkward that entire story sounds, because basically God is speaking to Abraham, telling him to leave his land and find a new land, and he's like, by the way, I have breasts, and Abraham's like, okay, cool, I'll go find a new land. So it's very awkward in that sense. Like, that God just felt the need to clarify. Yeah. By the way,
that's like a name for God. It's like one of his titles. It's not just like him saying something about himself. It's like that's just a weird like title that like I don't know.
And that's why they chose that interpretation. I'm the God who provides, because that's what he's saying in context. He's not saying I am.
Right. It makes sense in that context to talk about provision if he's going away from his home and land. To have someone who's going to provide for him, that would be comforting.
Let's touch on that just a little bit more, Malloy. I actually want to read out what it would say. just to give our viewers, all 2 or 3 of them, some context. So, Genesis 17, this is the Holman Christian Standard.
Oh boy.
And it starts at verse 1. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him saying, using this translation, I am the God with breasts. Live in my presence and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you greatly. Literally makes no sense.
Fell face down, and God spoke with him.
Yeah, exactly.
Fell face down out of shock, because...
Well, it does say later that Abraham fell face down, then he laughed. So maybe that's what it was.
No. I can't even discuss this seriously. Okay.
I know, I'm having so much trouble.
This is an idea that's actually becoming a lot more popular because, like, these more liberal ideas of God, like, you know, homosexuality not being sin and things like that, they're getting more popular. So is this idea of a God who is, you know, he doesn't identify as male as female. We just refer to him as it and the.
Which I find very odd, because these same people that are saying God should not be identified as a male or female are the same people that are saying that people should be, like, allowed to choose their, like, preferred pronoun and stuff. And it's like, you know, read the Bible. God's chosen his preferred pronoun. It's he.
Yeah.
But so it kind of seems to contradict. They kind of seem to be contradicting themselves in that aspect, at least to me. Like, they're kind of taking God and be like, oh, well, God doesn't have a say in this. We get to decide what he is, instead of letting him speak for himself.
Right. There is, and with, there's a thing we talked about a minute ago as far as, you know, is this a new idea kind of thing. And there was a quote that I found earlier that I wanted to read. Just all in the quotes tonight, it looks like, but that's okay. St. Gregory, you know, one of the old church fathers. He's a theologian, however the heck you say that word. He explained that the name Father is proper to God, not just a word that humanity uses. And he wrote that this title, that using any other name except for the titles that God gives us, serve as a starting point for the deflection of sound doctrine. Another church father, Saint, I'm going to butcher this, Athanasius, states that the specific names Father, Son, and Holy Spirit belong, quote, to God's own essence and being. I don't think we can be any more clear than that on the whole, you know, like you just said, he's given us what he wants to be called.
Right.
I mean, we have a list, and it's kind of an extensive list, honestly. I mean, between Yahweh, El Shaddai, Elohim, Eloheinu, all that stuff. I mean, we have a long list. It's pretty there. And it's complete. Yeah. I don't think we need to be adding to it or taking away from it.
Right.
Yeah, the question. Sorry. The question Matt's referring to, as we were talking about earlier, because one of the arguments is that this idea of God being male is one that's like Protestantism is the one who introduced it, or like this is a newer idea, and that like originally the church believed that God was just an it. So that's where he got that question from. Sorry, Christina, go ahead.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's good.
I'm sure it'll come back to me later.
Yeah, my next one was another verse, and I brought this one up earlier before we started this. So in Matthew 23:37, Jesus is looking over Jerusalem. He's talking about the people of Israel, and he compares himself to a mother hen and how he wants to gather his little chickens.
What was that verse again?
Matthew 23:37.
Right. Yeah. So just because God presents himself in a masculine way, like that doesn't mean he can't use a comparison that involves a woman. Like when you think of the person who like cares for and takes care of the children and protects the children, you think of the mother. You don't really think of the father. I guess, you know, like chicken, you know, she'll like spread her wings out and all the little chickens will run underneath and she'll protect them that way. The roosters don't do that. So he couldn't compare himself to a male chicken, a rooster, because they don't do that. Like,
Right.
It's a metaphor.
And to
It's
take,
not, you know?
to take that metaphor to stretch it a little bit further, to bring it back to humans, because God being a chicken is just a hilarious image.
Clearly a chicken. It's in
Although I guess that doesn't answer the question whether the chicken or the egg came first.
chicken was made in the image of God.
Sorry, my nephew decided to run it. Oh man. Oh, to bring it back to humans. So when you see you've got a family, and since we are on a geek channel, let's use Harry Potter's family. What was the first thing that Lily Potter did when Voldemort broke in the house?
Oh, okay.
She ran into Harry's nursery. Protect the baby.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
You haven't seen it, and I'm ashamed. But
I've seen it. I just wasn't paying attention.
what was the first thing that the father did? Jumped up, grabbed a weapon, and went straight for the danger.
I haven't seen the movie, but that would have been my guess.
They both died.
Well, it happened.
That's what they did.
They both got slaughtered, but that's beside the point.
That's a moot point.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert, Harry is an orphan. Sorry, guys.
Wait,
It does
what?
happen in the first 10 pages
He
of the first
died?
book, though. Anyway, but
Haven't had
the
much.
reflection here is he's showing protective qualities with this verse. bringing the children, in this case Israel is who he's talking to, but it refers to any of us too, to some extent. Bringing his children, under his wing for protection. But that does not mean that cancels out any of the stuff that he said in the past several thousand years that led up to the book of Matthew, that was talking about him being a protective father, being a warrior, being all this other stuff, all this laundry list of things. So it's not saying that God is a woman just because it says he compares himself to a hen. He's referring to his protective qualities, like a mother's
And
protective.
just because he presents himself, using masculine terms, doesn't mean he doesn't have qualities that are predominantly seen as more feminine. Like, he is merciful, he is gentle, he is caring. Those would typically be seen as female qualities. That doesn't exclude them from the character of God.
Well, I would say that they should typically be seen as decent human being qualities.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If you have
as well.
Right,
you're a halfway decent person, whereas somebody who lacks those qualities, male or female, at least a little bit of those qualities, compassion and kindness and protectiveness and a willingness to sacrifice your life for children or for those who are less fortunate or can't protect themselves, I would say that makes you a bad person to not be like that.
Right, and I would agree, but those traits are seen as more predominant in women, which one is gentleness? Women are seen as more gentle than men.
Women privilege.
Just like, I know it's stereotypical, and it's not, not that men can't be gentle or aren't gentle. Just like when you say a gentle person, you're probably the first image that comes in your mind is going to be a woman and not some, big, strong man.
Yeah.
But yeah, God is gentle too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea with that is women are as much made in God's image as we are. We being
right.
Men. So, you've got all these warrior qualities, all the strength and the passion to beat the crap out of people who hurt, the people we love, all of that kind of stuff. But being perfect, he also has the best of the other side without any of the faults. So,
right.
I think you're right when you're talking about him being above gender, but I will continue to call him him.
Oh, right.
Specifically
Yeah.
because he's closer to it.
Right, definitely. I would as well.
Yeah. So actually, the question I have, along with these thoughts here, because we agree that mercy is quality we predominantly see in women, but obviously that's just a moral character. It's not. It's more than just masculine, feminine.
Right.
Right. It's not inherent.
But would you guys go to the extent of saying that masculine and feminine are just cultural constructs, or there is an actual biblical masculine and feminine? Like how would you draw the line for people
A
watching?
societal construct.
Like
I would say that there's. Oh, go ahead, Christina.
I was trying to like, do you mean like character traits or more like gender roles?
Yeah, where do you draw the line of that? Character traits and gender roles. Like how do you help someone separate between this is masculine and feminine and no, this is just character?
I mean, character, God is very clear in the Bible about how he wants our character to be. And he makes no distinction between male and female when he's giving instruction on what kind of person we're going to be. You know, you've got the fruit of the Spirit. That's gender neutral, you know. That's not like, oh, these fruits are for women and these fruits are for men. No, like everybody needs all the fruit of the Spirit, man and woman, child, old people, everybody.
And I would say pretty well every one of the fruits.
Gender roles. What?
I would say pretty well every one of the fruits of the Spirit would be considered more feminine. I mean, kindness, patience, gentleness, self-control. You could probably tell me the rest of them, but
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. But I mean, I do think there are gender roles. Like, you know, we already had a podcast about the roles of women in ministry, which we determined were different from that of male in some aspects. So we have that. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with a woman's character. Just because she shouldn't hold the position of lead pastor doesn't mean she should be held to a lower standard than him, or that he should be held to a different moral standard than her.
right. And I would say, I would agree entirely. And just to simplify it down for people like me who have tiny little pea brains, your character is not dependent on your leadership quality, like your leadership role. Your character should always be correct, no matter what role you're in. So everybody should have the same character. Don't be a jerk. Basically, that's the difference. You have all the fruits of the Spirit and all that kind of stuff. The answer is don't be a jerk, but you can be, you can be a pastor and not be a jerk, or you can be somebody who just goes out and serves and not be a jerk. You can be a school teacher and not be a jerk. I mean, so central to a person is their character, but it's how that character fills each role determines whether it's being used in a masculine or kind of a feminine form.
Yeah. I've got two more questions. You guys answered that one really well, by the way. The reason I brought it up is because I think people who aren't decided on the topic listening might be like, well, how do we differentiate between just cultural ideas and then the actual? Right. My next question is another fun one. In Proverbs, we see that wisdom is always referred to as a female. Like Solomon writes about wisdom as a female. Right. So there is a belief that wisdom, which is a female in Proverbs, is also God.
Right. So, first of all, Proverbs is poetry. And you shouldn't take everything in poetic form literally.
Also, Solomon thought about women probably 90% of the day because he had how many wives? So he probably compared a lot of things to women.
Right, and also, what I see in the book of Proverbs is, yes, you have wisdom personified as a woman. You also have folly personified as a woman. And I think it's sort of showing through like attraction, if you will, like how people like trying to think of how to word this. Folly is shown as like seducing men, trying to attract them in inappropriate ways to do bad things. That's how folly is presented. Wisdom, on the other hand, is presented as more chaste and still trying to get men to follow her, men to listen to her, but not in the inappropriate ways that folly is. So I really think that what he's doing there is just showing the differences and not like saying, oh, God's a woman because wisdom's a woman. But, it's just a literary device showing how those two interact in the context of being women.
Yeah. I've also heard interpretations of like comparing folly, and like you said, a seductress, someone trying to seduce you to
Right.
adultery. But I've also heard wisdom being like Solomon comparing her more like to his mom rather than like a wife or like a sexual romantic figure, but more
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
But it's not talking about God, but more of an idea. It's poetry.
That's fair. Yeah. I like that.
You notice Solomon never compares wisdom to his father.
Yeah.
Zeal, passion, sure. Not really wisdom.
Yeah, well, David was not. I would not describe him like. I can think of friends who remind me of David, and the word that comes to mind is not wise. I have a lot of nice things to say about all of them, but wise is not the person.
Yeah.
Man after God's own heart. Not a man that knew what he was doing a lot of the time. So, I think it's important that in the language that the Bible uses, that it uses that language in a way that we understand. And I think that's why it was written the way it was. Is God inherently male? I don't know. Probably not. But he's definitely not inherently female. I think he's beyond kind of that. So, I don't know. This would be a little strange, I think, with this particular topic.
Yeah. So, final question before we head into closing thoughts. So, the theology we have looked at tonight, is it misled or is it just absolute heresy? And should we do the heresy meme edited in?
I'm always down for a good heresy.
I think this particular one needs to get a good heresy stamp. I think they're misled.
I really think we need to look at the motive behind it.
Misled, look back a couple of weeks to our female pastor episode. And,
yeah.
And I do have to say, I think that has something to do with it. So I think it's a mixture of both, but a good old-fashioned heresy stamp rejected by the Pope is fantastic for this one.
Yeah,
it's like Mythbusters.
The people that are teaching this, I'm not going to say that everyone who falls under this category is going to be like a complete heretic. They might have just been taught wrong.
Right.
And I don't think if they were simply taught wrong, but otherwise their theology is sound, I don't think that would disqualify them from being a true Christian. So I really think you got to look at the motive behind why people believe this. Yeah, but mostly, yeah, probably. Most people who believe this are leaning more towards heresy.
So I guess we'll get to closing thoughts. Matt, you can go first if you got stuff.
I think that was pretty well closing thoughts as well as an answer to your last question. I mean, it's more of a, if they don't realize that they're wrong or they've been taught this for some reason, I would say that most of the people involved in this are innocent bystanders, for lack of a better term. They're being taught incorrectly.
Right.
And it's wrong. It's misteaching. But the fault of this lies squarely on the shoulders or at the feet, depending on your choice of words here, of the ones who have these degrees. They've been to seminary. If they were taught that badly at seminary, somebody in the denomination needs to talk to the school. But that's not okay. You need to look at your teachers. But this one deserves a giant, like Mythbusters busted heresy meme thing. This one is total crap.
Nice. Christina?
And closing, I just want to bring up a quote that I read in one of the articles when I was reading through this topic. One of the women said that the reason she rejected God being male was because the quote was, if God is male, then the male is God. And I think the core of the problem with this theology is people see it as a threat. They see God being masculine as a threat because they see men as a threat. That's the whole idea behind the feminist movement. And really, God created men and women to work in harmony. He didn't create them to be opposed to each other. And so I think once we realize that, we don't have to work against men in order to be considered equal with them, because God sees everybody as equal, male or female. And I think this theology will, work itself out once people start realizing that.
Yeah. I guess my closing thoughts: God is clearly a chicken. He is clearly in the image chicken is clearly made in the image of God, the mother hen. I've had a lot of interesting talks about this in the past. I think, like Christina summed it up pretty well. A lot of people feel threatened by the male figure in our Western culture. I personally don't think it's heresy as much as it's misled. I think it's more misled because heresy is pretty much like straight up, you're not a Christian anymore. But yeah, it's frustrating to see that people it's people bringing their own cultural ideas into the Bible rather than letting the Bible define them. It's letting God be defined by your culture rather than God defining your culture. I think when I first became a Christian from agnostic, I had to get rid of a lot of my beliefs because a lot of my beliefs did not coincide with the Bible. But I said, God, my life is yours. Even if I personally don't agree with you on this, I'm going to submit to you and not try to change what you're saying. And ultimately, I feel like that's where a lot of the heart of this is. We're bothered by some of the things God stands for, and we want to change it to fit our cultural leanings. We wanted to redefine God. But those are just my thoughts. Really hope you guys enjoyed the broadcast. Hope you join us again sometime. Yeah. Good night.